Imagine, it is December 2001. Imagine you are in Buenos Aires. It is early in the day. You run a small accounting firm in a crowded district. You've been balancing books for nearly 20 years. You've been organizing other people's money and futures through numbers. And you've done everything right for yourself, too. You have a dollar account at the bank. There's an apartment in your name, a small plot of land, savings, decades of labor. As you sip your morning coffee, the phone rings. A client calls, their voice trembling. The banks are closed, they say. The accounts are frozen. You set your coffee down on the table. But this time, the table feels as if it is sliding out from under your feet. A few days later, the corralito begins. Argentines will never forget this word, meaning little fence. The government forcibly converted your dollar accounts into pesos at the official rate, at 1/4 the value of the real exchange rate. You defined yourself as someone who kept the books straight, followed the rules, and trusted the system. And did that definition protect you? It was thought to, until it was understood that it didn't. This is not an extraordinary story. It is a recurring one. And the reason it repeats is that every time people trust the same thing, that if they comply with the system will comply with them. In this video, I will not give you financial advice. I will not suggest an investment strategy. What I will do is something much older and much more disturbing. Together, we will read the autopsy reports left by history. We will examine what survived, and more importantly, why it survived. Because the answer to this question is one born from humanity's longest and most painful learning process. First, we must grasp the mechanism. Most people misimagine how governments seize assets. Soldiers at the door, forced surrenders, dramatic scenes. Sometimes that happens, but that is the most inefficient method. Therefore, it is the rarest. The real mechanism is much quieter, much more administrative, and for that reason, much more effective. When you deposit money into a bank, from a legal framework perspective, that money is no longer yours. It means you have given an unsecured loan to the bank. What do you have? A number, a digit appearing on a screen. For that digit to have a real-world equivalent, a regulatory framework must be functioning, and that framework changes in a moment of crisis. Rapidly, silently, on weekends. Cyprus, 2013. On Friday, you had money in your account. On Monday, the same account was subject to new rules. Deposits over 100,000 euros were forcibly converted. Laiki Bank depositors lost almost everything. Bank of Cyprus depositors lost 47%. In technical jargon, this is called a bail-in. The word is new, but the concept is not. Greece, 2015. Overnight, capital controls were implemented. Daily ATM withdrawals were limited to 60 euros. People with six-figure savings waited every day to try and withdraw 60 euros. The money was there, but it was inaccessible. Inaccessible money, even if legally yours, is functionally not yours. Lebanon, since 2019, dollar accounts were converted into Lebanese pounds at an official rate equivalent to 10% of the real market rate. Someone with $100,000 in a Beirut bank watched as that amount became equivalent to $10,000 to $15,000 in value over the years. The money didn't disappear. It was redefined, and this new definition was backed by the entire legal framework. Now, it is necessary to see that these examples are not scattered. They all fit the same structural logic. Governments do not manage citizens directly. They manage them through systems. The banking system, the tax system, the title deed system, the salary system, the investment system. These systems create a map of every citizen's financial existence. Every account, every deed, every salary, every stock is a point on this map. And in a financial crisis, the government looks at this map. When does a crisis come? When the math forces it. U.S. federal debt exceeded $36 trillion by early 2025. The annual budget deficit is approximately $2 trillion. Interest payments on the debt, for the first time in history, surpassed the defense budget, exceeding $1 trillion per year. According to the Congressional Budget Office's own projections, if current policies continue, Even if no recession occurs, the debt-to-GDP ratio will reach 150% by 2050. This is a ratio that no major Western democracy has escaped in the last 200 years without defaulting, creating hyperinflation, or resorting to direct seizure mechanisms. Japan is the pioneer version of this picture. The debt-to-GDP ratio is over 260%. The central bank holds more than 50% of government bonds. Interest rates were kept near zero for decades. This is a mechanism that silently erodes a citizen's savings. If someone told you, "We are going to seize a portion of your money," you would likely resist. But an inflation gap that is never noticed and never makes the news produces the same result over years. This, too, is a seizure, just an invisible one. So, what does history show us survived? There are 5 categories. And these 5 categories share one common trait. They all stand outside the administrative map. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Let's get into the video. First, knowledge and skills. In every crisis in history, the people who got back on their feet the fastest were not those who carried the most assets with them. They were those who had nothing to carry but possessed functional skills that the market paid for in any environment. Think of the Jewish professionals fleeing Germany in 1933. Doctors, engineers, physicists, mathematicians. What did they leave behind? Everything. Title deeds were confiscated. Bank accounts were frozen or dissolved by taxes. Businesses were forcibly transferred. Gold was surrendered. But what did they carry with them? What was in their brains? And that thing gained value instantly on the other side of the border. When Albert Einstein arrived in America in 1933, he had almost nothing in a material sense. Within a few weeks, he took a position at Princeton, because the asset he carried was a kind that no government decree could freeze. This applies not only to Einstein, Vietnamese refugees of the late 1970s, Cuban exiles after 1959, those who emigrated from Argentina after 2001, those who left Venezuela after 2014. In every crisis, those who rebuilt the fastest were those who carried their functional skills. A tailor is still a tailor. An electrician is still an electrician. A software engineer is still a software engineer. There's an important distinction here. The difference between a credential and a skill. Credentials are papers given by institutions. They can be canceled. They may not be recognized. If the institution itself has collapsed, they become meaningless. But functional skill is jurisdiction independent. Someone who knows how to weld will not be left stranded, even if they don't know which currency will measure its value. In no period of history, under any circumstances, has this lost its validity. Second, portable physical assets held outside institutional control. Gold is not as simple a sanctuary as people think, but the historical record doesn't entirely exclude it either. The real issue is where the gold is kept. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. All citizens were required to deliver all gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates to Federal Reserve banks by May 1st. The penalty for noncompliance was a $10,000 fine, or up to 10 years in prison. $10,000 is roughly equivalent to $220,000 today. For gold held in bank vaults or registered institutions, individual intent was irrelevant. The institution complied. The asset was surrendered. But for gold held somewhere in a house, in a place known only to the owner, a physical search was required. And for that search, the location must first be known. The lack of knowledge of the location, the absence of institutional visibility, moved that asset off the administrative map. Precious stones also played a historical role in this framework. Stories like the family fleeing Belgium in 1940 with diamonds sewn into coat linings are part of patterns that are hard to verify specifically but recur structurally. Small, portable, unregistered, difficult to detect. These assets become a sanctuary not because of a legal privilege, but because of their physical properties. But this category also has serious limits. It is not liquid. It requires expertise. It carries physical risk. And precisely while its invisibility makes it resistant to administrative seizure, it creates other vulnerabilities. Third, decentralized digital assets. This is a category that did not exist before 2009. and it has a structural feature that has never existed in any period of history. It can be stored in memory. A Bitcoin wallet is controlled by a private key. This key can be represented as a seed phrase consisting of 12 or 24 ordinary English words. A person who memorizes these words carries the key to their assets in their brain. There is no physical object to be frozen, no institution to be served a decree, no customs record to be detected. People escaping capital controls in China, refugees crossing from Venezuela to Colombia, citizens in Afghanistan whose access to accounts was cut in 2021. They all use this mechanism. Neither the Taliban nor the U.S. Treasury nor any international organization could access these wallets because there was no institution to access. But the limits of this category must also be stated transparently. Volatility is very high. Bitcoin fell more than 70% from its peak in 2022. There is technical difficulty. If the seed phrase is forgotten or entered incorrectly, the assets become permanently inaccessible. There is no customer service, no recovery mechanism, no court order, and there is increasing regulatory pressure. Exchanges, which are conversion points into fiat currency, are points that governments can audit. China banned crypto trading. The EU is implementing a comprehensive regulatory framework. Reporting requirements regarding self-hosted wallets are on the agenda in the U.S. The asset itself may resist, but the conversion infrastructure always remains a point of vulnerability. Fourth, offshore assets held in stable jurisdictions. Power ends at the border. This is a structural reality that wealthy individuals have understood for centuries, but the middle class rarely considers. Think of two Argentine citizens on two sides of the Rio de la Plata in December 2001. One holds $100,000 in a bank in Buenos Aires. The other holds $100,000 in an Uruguayan bank in Montevideo, just a 90-minute ferry ride away. When the corralito came, the first one's deposit was forcibly converted into pesos at a fixed rate. Nothing happened to the second one's money. Same person, same amount, same currency, different jurisdiction, completely different result. Argentine law cannot reach a Uruguayan bank. Argentine capital controls cannot freeze an account in Geneva. Beirut's decision cannot affect funds in Singapore. This is not tax evasion. This is geographic diversification of jurisdictional risk, and it is a legal, declared, compliant strategy. As with every situation, the strategy has limits. Foreign accounts trigger reporting obligations in most countries. In the U.S., FBAR filing is mandatory for foreign accounts over $10,000. These reports create a record. Records can be used for pressure, and the chosen jurisdiction itself can become unstable. Someone holding assets in Cyprus before 2013 to escape Greek risk experienced that risk there as well. Choosing a truly stable jurisdiction requires relying on long-term records of the rule of law, independent central banks, and institutions proven to historically respect property rights. Fifth, social capital and community networks. This is the asset that appears on no balance sheet, is mentioned by no financial advisor, and is seen by no government. And in every societal collapse recorded by history, this has been the greatest determinant of individual survival. Let's go back to post-2001 Argentina. The official economy is at a standstill. Banks are closed. Cash is scarce. Unemployment reached 25%. The poverty rate hit 50% overnight. What was born against this? Clubes del Truque, barter clubs. These networks, which reached 6 million participants at their peak, established an informal economy where people traded goods and services directly, using local credit ratings as a common medium of exchange. The baker gave bread in exchange for a haircut. The mechanic did repairs in exchange for lessons for his children. The accountant kept books in exchange for vegetables. The ones who fared best in this system were not those who had the most money before the crisis. It was the era of those with the most connections, those known to be the most reliable, those rooted in community, those with a strong record of reciprocity. In Russia after the collapse of the Soviets, there was BLAT, informal networks of relationships and mutual favors that operated in the Soviet bureaucratic shadow for decades. Those who possessed these networks survived the transition. What happened to those who leaned on the official system, state salaries, and state distribution? Research conducted after the 2005 Hurricane Katrina revealed the same result. The strongest predictor of survival and recovery was not wealth, nor insurance coverage, nor state aid. It was the strength of social connection. People with strong community ties were rescued faster, received more informal aid, and were rebuilt sooner. Social capital has these qualities. You cannot freeze a relationship. You cannot apply capital controls to trust. You cannot issue a forced conversion order for a reputation. You cannot retroactively tax a favor owed. You cannot seize the fact that someone else knows you to be trustworthy. This is the ultimate off-balance sheet asset. And now, we must stop at exactly this point. Modern life, especially in developed Western economies, has systematically eroded social capital. Robert Putnam documented this extensively in his book Bowling Alone. Church attendance, union membership, civic organization participation, neighborhood relations, even dinner parties. All of these have dropped dramatically since the 1960s. The average Westerner in 2024 has fewer close friends, fewer community ties, and fewer neighborhood interactions than in any measurable period in history. This means the societies most likely to face a financial crisis stemming from unsustainable state debts are also those who hold their assets in forms most vulnerable to government seizure and whose social capital is at a historical low point. This is not a coincidence. It is a trap. Look at the 5 categories again. Knowledge and skills, portable physical assets outside institutional control, decentralized digital assets, assets in foreign jurisdictions, social capital, and community networks. What do they all share? They all stand outside the administrative map. Visibility plus administrative access are the 2 necessary conditions for seizure. If both are not present, the mechanism does not work. If the government can see the asset but cannot reach it, that is the foreign jurisdiction case. If it could theoretically reach it but cannot see it, that is the physical ownership case. If it can neither see it nor reach it, that is the case of knowledge, skills, and social capital. And let's return to the dentist in Munich. His gold went with Executive Order 133. His savings eroded with the destruction of the currency. His property was worn down by emergency tax levies. His bonds turned into the debt paper of a government that would cease to exist in 12 years. But that dentist who knew French kept his relationships alive with colleagues in Zurich, kept some savings in Geneva account, constantly improved his surgical skills, and was known as trustworthy in his community, experienced a different kind of destiny. They were not perfect options. They were not comfortable options, but they were options. And in a crisis, options are the only valid form of wealth. Good intentions do not change math. Franklin Roosevelt is considered one of the most popular, well-intentioned presidents in American history. He signed Order 6102 anyway, because gold reserves were eroding and the dollar peg was unsustainable. Good intentions do not stand in front of mathematical necessity. They never have. They never will. The last fortress of property is being taken down not by a physical siege, but by a digital update. Not silently, openly. Central bank digital currencies are being designed with programmable restrictions. Bail-in frameworks were woven into European legislation years ago. Cash restrictions are expanding. Capital flow reporting requirements are deepening. These are published in white papers, become subject to discussion at central bank conferences, and are legislated into regulatory frameworks. The infrastructure for the next seizure is being built while most people are still debating, could it happen here? It has always happened there, wherever that there was at the moment. And there was always a country of people who believed their institutions were stronger, their rights more solid, and that their government would never do it, until the moment it did. The question is not, will your government do this? The question is, will math eventually require it? And if math requires it, history has given us only one answer. Those who always stayed inside the line lost the most. Those who stood outside the line at least had options. This analysis is an autopsy of the past, not a prophecy of the future. But the past has already said everything it needs to say. Most people don't start reading it until they are inside it. You are reading it now. That makes a difference. Thanks for watching, See you in the next videos.